Hey guys, I know it's been quite some time since Otaku Shinsaku here has made a video, but I am back again. I have moved. You'll realize now my background has changed is because I have moved, and this isn't going to be my permanent background. I'm also going to be moving again in a couple of months, so there's that. So get used to a completely new background once that's all set up. Basically, this is just a transitionary phase. But getting into it, I am going to get back into doing video reactions and all sorts of stuff because I want to get back into making YouTube videos. For a while there, I was heavy into TikTok, and then I got banned from TikTok, and then some things happened in my life where now I'm moved. So and I've started a new day job and all that good stuff. So things have changed with me all the same. So things have happened, things are in transitionary periods, and all of that, and I'm just rambling at this point. But I do actually have something for you guys. Today we are going to be reacting to a simple video by Poseidon Entertainment called The Divide Between Theme Park Fans and Disney Adults. So, let's get into it.
I know. You might have clicked on this video and thought to yourself, oh look, another person on YouTube who's trying to generate clicks by ragging on Disney adults. I can't deny that when I actually search Disney adults as a topic, they do generally seem to be a punching bag that generates easy clicks for people, but after skimming through some of those videos, I found that they were either just mean-spirited commentary, where people would point to obnoxious TikTok influencers and say, haha, aren't they weird guys? Or were otherwise just jumbled messes of bad information about theme park operation, for people who then went in circles and made no points other than there are adults who enjoy going to Disney and knew that putting Disney adults in the title would generate substantial viewership. If you've been watching me for a while though, you know that I don't make a video unless I have a different perspective or something new to add to the conversation. So let me be clear. I do think there is a very specific type of person who I think qualifies as a quote Disney adult, and that their choices actively harm the Disney theme park experience. But the question is, what is a Disney adult? If I look at myself, I certainly recognize that I'm a Disney fan, and that I find that
Yeah, I'm just hoping I'm not a Disney adult because of the fact that, like, I do want to go to the theme park at some point because the last time I've been to a Disney theme park was when I was like 10. So that was like literally like 20 years ago or something like that. At this point, I'm dating myself. Literally just letting it all hang out there about how old I am. Whatever. But yeah, I really do want to go to the theme park. So based on this video, we're gonna see if I'm a quote unquote Disney adult or not. Hopefully I'm not. Not like one of those crazy people. Jesus, no.
the history of the company fascinating as an American cultural institution, and their theme parks were something that I grew up recognizing as the gold standard of themed entertainment. You know that I've been incredibly critical of Disney from a leadership perspective, but that's because, as a park fan, I'm just constantly frustrated with how this company is running its park experiences because they're chasing short term profit and turning their parks into big, superficial billboards of movie brand synergy, instead of, actual theme parks where placemaking and theming are the most important creative aspect. That's not to say that I'm against utilizing intellectual property in the parks either, as it can obviously be pretty great when implemented in a themed area specifically designed for it, like Fantasyland. But the issue I have is nonsensical decision making, like actively removing the movie making aspect that tied all of the IP into Hollywood studios, or just shoving in random properties wherever, like Avengers Campus or Avatar into California Adventure, or bringing the Guardians of the Galaxy into Epcot. The emphasis on Disney IP not only oversaturates the parks with thematically unconnected attractions, but it comes at the expense of creative original attractions that the company is too afraid to invest in because they are risk adverse to a serious fault. The new test track probably only stayed an original concept because General Motors is the sponsor. But look, you actually designed an interesting ride that is also refreshing because it's not just slapping a character onto the ride system. If GM had dropped out as a sponsor, I have no doubt the test track would have turned into some clumsily implemented Cars attraction where you meet Lightning McQueen in a virtual racing simulator or some other nonsense. And you know what? There would be a ton of people with zero consumer standards for themed entertainment cheering on a bad idea like this, otherwise known as Disney adults. Grown people who engage with the Disney parks at a stunningly superficial level and actively reinforce bad decisions made by company leadership. These are the same kind of people who made trivial complaints about Tiana's Bayou Adventure because Tiana wasn't in her specific dress from the film, or who were suddenly okay with the low-budget tackiness of converting Paradise Pier into Pixar Pier simply because they recognized the iconography of the characters that were pasted onto everything.
Yeah, I just want to like get in here real quick because I just want to say that like I completely agree because like I said when I went to Disneyland the last time they were celebrating their 50th anniversary, so I got like the golden Mickey ears and all that stuff. And my family was lucky enough to afford a ticket to both parks, Disneyland and California Adventure. And yeah, I remember when California Adventure had like very little to do with Pixar. Like occasionally they would have Pixar elements, like occasionally they would have a parade of like Lightning McQueen and Mater come through and stuff like that, but that was because Pixar was still like in its heyday. Like I believe at the time one of the newest movies was Cars, I believe, because this was definitely before Cars 2. This was definitely before Pixar started getting into their sequel era that they're in now. So, yeah, they did not have all the theming. Like that roller coaster was just like a very, very fast roller coaster. It had nothing to do with the Incredibles, right? I believe they call it the Incredicoaster now. Yeah, again, I don't remember what it was called originally, but it was not the Incredibles coaster when I went on it. And I loved it. It was a very, very fun coaster. I love the fact that clearly also because most likely it saved them money, all they did was retheme it. They didn't change the coaster in any major way because again, it means that when I like if I go to Disneyland, I can still ride that coaster and just in my mind get rid of all the incredible stuff because that's how the coaster was before I rode it. I mean, when I rode it last as a kid. So I agree with him. Like I did love the idea that that park was California Adventure. Like it was its own thing. Yes, it was owned by Disney, and you could heavily tell that because again the parades and stuff like that. Um, but it was treated at the time like its own thing. Whereas now, as he said, it's basically been completely rethemed into basically being Pixar Land, which kind of sucks because it gets rid of that original majesty that the original park had of being its own thing and celebrating basically California. Right, like again, one of my favorite rides at the there was Soarin' California. Yes, it was a very simple ride. You literally just sat on these chairs. They lifted up in front of a giant projector screen, and you flew around California. But again, that ride was emphasizing what California Adventure was, which was a theme park dedicated to the wonderful state that is California that Disneyland is in. But we don't have that anymore. So we basically have Pixar Land now that replaces California Adventure, and it's kind of sucks. Uh, but it is what it is. It is definitely what it is.
I was growing up, I recognized Disney as the undisputed industry leader, not just because their parks were thematically cohesive and IP was implemented tastefully most of the time, but because their theming and attractions had depth. Take the cultural history on showcase in Spaceship Earth, or the real science of living with the land, and contrast them with the Guardians of the Galaxy, who, if they weren't in Cosmic Rewind, really wouldn't make much of a difference to the ride experience. There are so many people who praise the attraction as the best Disney ride ever made, and while I can agree that the track layout is spectacular, the actual Guardians of the Galaxy aspect is just god-awful, not just through its superficiality, but through the absolutely atrocious writing of the pre-show, which is both boring and painfully unfunny. The point I'm making is that Disney uses their intellectual property as a crutch for half-baked attraction design, and while there are moments of brilliance here and there, like in certain scenes in Tiana's, the new test track, or even the Beacon Barrel Bar over by Pirates of the Caribbean, the mostly forgettable or even incompetent attraction design is just really not acceptable for a cultural institution like Disney, which once had a lot more meaning and cultural depth in its parks, rather than just simply vomiting characters everywhere. As a theme park fan, I'm incredibly frustrated with Disney leadership for making these decisions because of the long-term and expensive damage it's causing to their park experiences and branding, and yet, I always feel like I'm fighting with the demographic of people known as the Disney adult, who will make every possible excuse to defend the company because their standard for what makes Disney good is simply recognizing characters that they know. There is absolutely a large divide between theme park fans who once saw Disney as the leader in themed entertainment, and now this new demographic that is specifically being catered to by Disney leadership. And the result is now, well, Disney becoming more akin to Six Flags, in the sense that it's just a bunch of random characters being thrown about everywhere to appeal to sheltered suburbanites who have no actual standards for the entertainment that they consume. So today, I wanted to actually define and dive into the differences between theme park fans and Disney adults, because on the surface, to an outsider, the distinction may not be clear. And I wanted to highlight why the phenomenon of the Disney adult is such a detrimental catalyst of negative changes to the Disney parks.
Oh yeah, now that you showed this video, oh yeah, oh god. For as much as I like Guardians of the Galaxy movies, I will never, ever forgive Disney for replacing their, this ride with Guardians of the Galaxy. Because for those who don't know, and what's amazing is that there will be people who don't know, this original drop ride was based off of give me a second. It was based off of the Twilight Zone. It was called the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror when I wrote it. And I loved it because, again, as a horror fan, as a movie fan, as a film buff, stuff like that, just a geek. Again, that's where the whole like otaku shinsaku thing comes from. Is I'm just like this general otaku. I'm just this general geek. That I loved it. I loved the idea of there being a official ride that celebrates the classic TV series of the Twilight Zone. And it made you feel like, the whole theming was, it made you feel like you were in a Twilight Zone episode. And that's why the whole Drop Tower thing actually worked, because the original theming of this was that you were in a broken down, run down, shitty elevator, right? That the entire theme was, it was a basically old, rundown, like really decrepit, the cobwebs everywhere, fucking hotel, right? You were in this really, really old hotel, and the ride you were on was the elevator. And every time the doors would open, a new scene would happen, right? And so it was really, really fun, and I loved it. I loved the crap out of it. But now I can never ride that again because it's been completely rethemed. As you can tell, every time the doors open, instead of seeing some sort of spooky, scary, spoopy Twilight Zone thing, it's the fucking Guardians of the Galaxy mugging at you. Disney, fucking why? Why? No, seriously, why do you have to take away some of your classic rides? Because, like, why is it that you're keeping the old Peter Pan, ride? You're keeping the original Pirates of the Caribbean ride. Sure, you rethemed it to have Jack Sparrow the fuck everywhere, but outside of occasionally Jack Sparrow appearing in places, it is still basically the old Pirates of the Caribbean ride. Whereas this, you're like, yeah, no, fuck Twilight Zone. Who gives a shit about Twilight Zone? And I get it. I'm an old soul in a young man's body, but still, what the fuck? Why do you have to get rid of the Twilight Zone? Because here's the thing. You really want to piss me off. Like, if you guys out there listening to the sound of my voice want to know what is the one thing that Disney can do to get me to never go to Disneyland again, like, or at least not Disney, not ever again, but at least get really fucking mad. Like, you want to see me get mad, like, and I will make a video if this happens. If they get rid of my favorite ride of all time, which is um the Haunted Mansion. Uh because the Haunted Mansion ride is my favorite ride at Disneyland. All right, it is by far my favorite ride at Disneyland. Period. End of discussion. So if they get rid of that, or they retheme it with some Star Wars bullshit, right? Because again, they easily could. Like, you'd be like, well, how will they redo this the stretching room? You know they could fucking redo it. They can come up with some bullshit. Oh, you're going, instead of the stretching room, you're in an intergalactic elevator for Guardians of the Galaxy, or or you're teleporting or beaming up to a fucking shield or whatever. It's Disney. They could do it, but if they did, I would be so fucking pissed, dude. I would be fucking. Oh no. No, let's not even go there. Oh, do not. Disney, you've already touched Twilight Zone. Do not touch Haunted Mansion. Swear to God. I swear to God.
To begin, I wanted to answer the question of what makes someone a theme park fan, and how is it different than the people who exclusively go to Disney? Oh, also, please leave a like on the video if you're so inclined. When I was growing up, I was absolutely fascinated by Walt Disney World, and as a native Floridian, while I did enjoy the theming of other parks like Universal, Busch Gardens, and SeaWorld, I saw Disney as that high standard that no one else could really touch. I loved
Yeah. I'm gonna let it again. I'll let him play out and let him do his talk. But this just brings up the fact that I'm kind of jealous of him because he grew up in Florida, whereas I'm from the Pacific Northwest. So like I said, when my family finally was able to afford a Disney vacation when I was 10, we went to Disneyland instead of Disney World. But that is something that I want to change because now that I'm making my own money, making my own like cash, um, I want to go to Disney World. So when I go on my own Disney vacation, I want to go to Disney World, and and my whole plan is to go for at least a week because I want to visit all the parks and I don't want to feel rushed. Right? And when I say a week, I mean like a normal work week. I want to spend at least 5 days in the park. And the total vacation I want to be 7 days because I want to spend 5 days in the park and have a couple of buffer days, like, like on each side where I can like relax. I can go to the hotel and just relax and decompress, go to the pool and stuff and relax because again, when it comes to all of that, I will be staying at one of the resorts in the park. So most likely what I've looked at is like Pop Century. I'll probably stay there. But yeah, no, I want to go to Disney World. So, I will let this guy talk about his experiences with Disney World because that's something I don't share. The thing I do know is when I went to Disneyland when I was 10 during their 50th anniversary. And that's about it. That's what I can talk to from my experience.
classic Universal attractions like Confrontation, E.T., Earthquake, and Jaws. And outside of that, attractions like Journey to Atlantis had a high appeal as well. But I always compared them to feeling like something that Disney would build because they really were the industry standard. I wasn't the only one either, as I remember how people perceived Universal as a quote, scary version of Disney because of how intense their dark rides were in comparison, which was shocking to so many people at the time. As a kid, I was always a fan of themed entertainment more broadly though. Whether it was my first experience with a rainforest cafe, to themed aquariums and zoos, or to themed museums in the Washington Mall, or places like the Kennedy Space Center. I enjoyed the rare dark ride I could find in other parks like Dollywood's Blazing Fury, or the Curse of Dark Castle at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. Since starting this channel, I've also learned a tremendous amount about the themed industry, and looking at parks throughout the world like Efteling or Phantasialand, I'm seeing themed entertainment that I find to be incredibly interesting, and is oftentimes a lot better realized than from what I'm seeing out of the current era of Disney. Yet, there are people who would never appreciate this kind of entertainment simply because it doesn't have a familiar movie character attached, and oftentimes, those people will never venture outside of Disney either, completely writing off other experiences because they specifically want some nebulous cutesy Disney branding. So the question is, what is a theme park fan, and what do other people not understand about the appeal? I've been thinking about this question for a long time and was having trouble coming up with an answer, but I remember a very specific moment as a child while riding the Magic Kingdom version of Pirates of the Caribbean. Right after the drop, and emerging out into the battle scene between the ship and the fort, I remember looking up at the ceiling and just being fascinated by observing the air ducts and how they were painted black to blend them into the scene, even though most people weren't going to look up there anyways. It was at that moment that I realized that I was fascinated by the attempt of the illusion, trying to immerse people into this atmospheric environment and moving through various scenes to tell a story. There was something magical about watching the animatronics emulating pirates and townsfolk, something captivating about observing the details and effects of the sets, and a sense of fascination that Disney went to the lengths of even painting the air ducts to maintain the illusion as much as possible. I grew up hearing people describing the Disney magic of the parks, but for me as a young child, I always interpreted that to mean the sense of atmosphere and surrealism of the dark rides, and not what most people actually meant, which was probably a vacation insulated from the outside world. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love walking around the Eisner-era resorts and appreciating the depth of theming, and I can understand why feeling like you're in a bubble is appealing, but I think that a lot of people fail to understand that sense of surrealism that comes from appreciating the illusion of themed attractions. Why do some people understand this feeling and a lot of others don't though? Well, weirdly enough, the answer clicked for me in Edinburgh this past summer. I was touring the city's castle and was walking through a museum that covered Scotland's military history, and I encountered a miniature diorama depicting the Battle of Salerno during World War II. That was when the thought occurred to me that theme parks are really just life-size dioramas, and that the appeal of world building, or maybe observing someone else's attempt at it, is an inherent part of human creativity that has wide appeal. That's why model builders are so passionate, or why games like Roller Coaster or Zoo Tycoon have continued to remain popular. There's an inherent human desire to tell stories and build environments around them, whether through writing, filmmaking, or other forms of art, and why inherently creative toys, such as Lego, are popular with kids or even adults who have strong imaginations. That's why I've always found theme parks and themed entertainment fascinating, because the attempt to bring those creative world-building aspirations into a full-scale experience is inherently interesting. You know the illusion is just an illusion, but observing and analyzing the artist's intent, or knowing the complicated effort and technology.
Yeah, no, and so this is clearly showing that I'm more of a theme park fan than a Disney adult. Even though I do like Disney, and, obviously as anybody would, likes their characters and all of that, I do appreciate the artistry of theme parks trying to tell stories with their theming. It's similar in the way that my favorite holidays are Christmas and Halloween, and I think it's mainly just due to the fact that both of them share something incredibly special, which is those two holidays specifically get artists to become obsessively creative in the fact that, for example, for Halloween, one of my favorite things I love doing every Halloween is going to haunted mansions, haunted rides, haunted hay rides, stuff like that. Why? even if it's like some sort of like local thing that like some farmer in his family did, like I love doing it. Why? Because I love seeing the artistry involved. I love seeing the creative process playing out in front of me. Because yes, like him, I know it's all fake, right? I know it's all fake. It's the same reason why like horror movies don't really scare me, but I love watching them. Right? It's, like my parents have always like thought that I was like some sort of disgusting soul because of the fact that I was that person who would watch the entire Saw movies when I was like in middle school. They're like, "Well, how can you watch all this gory stuff?" It's because of the fact that I know it's all fake. First and foremost, the actors are fine. Like you can literally watch them on the red carpet. Like they're fine. No one's dead. Like none of the actors who are in these movies actually died. Like it's all fake. You can watch the behind the scenes stuff. You can watch them in the commentaries on the DVDs, yucking it up. They're fine. It's all fake. What you're seeing when you see a leg getting ripped off, it's not an actual leg. It's a prosthetic and it was filled with fake blood and et cetera, et cetera. Right? But here's the thing. The reason why I do that is for the same reason why a trained magician will go watch other magicians. Do they know how the trick is performed? Yes. So what is the entertainment in watching another magician? You would think, if you know how the trick is done, why are you watching another magician? What? For the reason, it's because it's simple. You are watching someone with talent. You are appreciating their talent. You're appreciating their skill they're putting into something you know the secret sauce of. You know how it's done. But you're sitting there going, wow, that is a creative solution to do what you attempted to do. And so it's the same thing with theme parks. Like he says, the entire time you go, I know that it's all fake. I know it's all fake. There's air ducts everywhere. Again, I know it's all fake. I'm in just an like, oh, you're in a haunted mansion. No, I'm just in a building with an industrial sized elevator. Like this, I know the reality of what it is, but I'm appreciating the artistry of the fact that artists are doing everything they can to mask that. And so you're like, oh, that is really cool. Like for example, in the stretching room of Haunted Mansion, because again, love that ride. Even though I know that in reality the stretching room is literally just an industrial-sized elevator, and the entire reason for it was because of the fact that they needed to have a hallway that goes underneath the railroad, so they came up with the elevator thing, right? It was a solution to a problem that they had. But because they needed to theme the stretching room, they can't just have you step into an industrial elevator. That would be disgusting. No, it's Disney. They have to theme it up. They have to add some zest to it, and so of course they had artists paint out the paintings you see, and the paintings are really, really elaborate because again, you got to remember these are really long paintings on really long pieces of canvas, and so you sit there and you can admire the artistry of like, wow, these guys had to paint something on a really long canvas, and specifically they needed to paint something on a really long canvas that looks good when the elevator is stopped at the top and then continues to look good as more and more of the painting is revealed. So it's just a really, really cool thing. And so yeah, you just admire the whole talent of it all and the hard work that went into making this ride, and continuing on that, the hard work that goes into making these parks.
That goes into all of this is a big part of the appeal. Have you ever encountered the kind of person who says, why would I go to Disney and see a fake castle when I can travel to Europe and see a real one? They're obviously both appealing for very different reasons, but the person who dismisses themed entertainment as some sort of fake, unworthy emulation of the real world is clearly missing the point. Because, well, the illusion is the point.
Yes, exactly. Because you could say the same thing about a lot of things, which is, oh, Why would I watch a documentary on a castle when I could just go to a castle and get a guided tour? Why would I watch a movie about X or Y when I can go see X or Y in real life? Because it's all about the artistry involved. It's all about seeing the magic of and the creativity of human imagination take place in front of you. Why go see Cinderella's castle, even though you could see a real castle in Europe? Because when you're going to see Cinderella's castle, you're seeing the artistry involved. You are experiencing human artists. Because you got to remember, in this shot, for example, in this shot that you guys are looking at, when you see Cinderella's castle, all right? Now get back to me. Back to me. Back to me. So, Cinderella's castle in that shot is not real. At first, when Disneyland was created, it was just an empty field. Artists by hand had to make that castle. And not only that, because it's not a real castle, it's not a real life-size castle, they had to make it so that they had to design it with ways that tricks your eyes into making the castle look bigger than it actually is. Because if you use Google Maps and Google satellite images, you can see, for example, that castle is not that big. You can see the fact that it's a facade. But that's what makes standing there on Main Street that much more special, because you are seeing the fact that artists had to take that into account. Artists had to specifically design that castle as a facade and make it look massive. They had to make it look bigger than it actually is. And the fact that it does, and the fact that the illusion works when you're standing on Main Street, is why you go to the parks. Because it's that artistry that you are sitting there in. You are sitting there and just sucking in all the Disney Imagineer magic.
It's just impressive to see the attempt at bringing a fantasy castle into the real world, between the forced perspective to give it scale, and also because of the actual scale itself, essentially blowing a model up into a giant structure purely for entertainment purposes. Of course, themed entertainment has different levels of intent, and doesn't have to be completely immersive to be appealing, because I also enjoy decorated spaces with a theme like Cracker Barrel or a Bass Pro Shop, but I think that fundamentally, a fascination with themed entertainment comes from that desire to simulate life or to want to tell a story. The problem, of course, is that as widespread as this interest is, there are many people who just simply lack that creative spark, and so they don't get it. I think of the unimaginative businessmen that Walt Disney vocally hated, who live in a dull and sterile corporate world run by money, and I think that's a fundamental part of why Disney is going down the path that it is today, and throwing theming out the window. It's why the new core of Epcot is this type of bland minimalism that showcases instances of shallow theming in Disney IP, believing that simply the presence of iconography is enough to get people excited. Society certainly contains many creative people who love and engage with the art of others, whether it be film buffs, theater goers, or model makers, but there are many other people who I think are just not capable of understanding this appeal, and I think that's why there is a fundamental misunderstanding of what makes for a theme park fan.
Yeah, and so this is clearly, again, from this video, I can clearly tell that I'm a theme park fan, not a Disney adult, so I'm in that category. Because, again, like I said, I'm a generalized nerd. When it comes to that, I'm not a model maker, but I do go to theater. I love watching theater. When I was in high school, I took theater classes as electives because I loved and appreciated the artistry of turning a barren, school stage into a countless plethora of other things. Like, what started out 2 weeks ago as a barren school stage is now the backlot of New York in a rundown part of the city because we're doing the Little Shop of Horrors or whatever. Like, it is so cool to see that, right? It is so cool to see that, and it's in the entire time you're watching the Little Shop of Horrors on stage, you're getting to experience the fact that these people become these characters for a few hours. um and you as the audience member, you become a part of it. Like, again, even though you obviously have to know that it's all fake, you're literally sitting in a theater and the actors are like, especially in the front row, the actors are like 15, 10 feet in front of you, right? But it's all fake, but you buy into it. You buy into the imagination. And so that's really cool. So yes, I'm a film buff. I'm a theater goer, right? I love seeing human creativity take place in front of me. It is an amazing thing. And when I was a kid, I wanted to be a part of that. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a film director, right? Because I wanted to, take part of that magic and give back to the world, the energy that I took by watching all this art. But yeah, no, I completely agree with him that I would love if Disney eventually can get a CEO that cares again about the theming of their parks and about their parks telling stories through their theming.
Unlike other artistic disciplines, theme parks are also significantly more expensive to engage with and limited geographically, and so less accessible, which is why theme park fandom feels rather niche. Even so, for the less creatively inspired, I think that themed entertainment does appeal to a broader demographic of people, but probably at a more subconscious level. The average person might not look around and notice the small details of Main Street USA, but I think they can feel the impact through the cohesion of the experience.
Yeah, and remember in the beginning of this video when I said that I wanted to spread my Disney World vacation out to like at least 5 days with the parks? That's why. Because I don't want to feel rushed. Because when I'm in the parks, I want to be able to spend all day in the parks, from, gates opening to gates closing, and just experience that. Like, when I walk around, I don't want to just be rushing from ride to ride. I want to just suck in the vibe and the atmosphere of the parks at Disney World. I want to, go up to the buildings and look at them and look at the paint and just really, really suck in all the hard work that all the Disney employees have done to turn this from a barren landscape into a park, into a magical place that takes you away from the mundane into the extraordinary.
It's why when you go to a park that doesn't do theming well, you can tell that something is off, but can't quite place exactly why. There are, however, people who will never get it, like the corporate businessman, the angry grandfather that you drag into the parks and put into a shirt featuring Grumpy from Snow White, and ironically, of all people, Disney adults. The question now is, what exactly is a Disney adult? Immediately, I think of them as someone who wears a lot of Disney merchandise, often does Disney bounding when visiting the parks, and has no real identity outside of just talking about Disney all the time. While I think all of that is accurate, I also need to clarify that just because you wear the merch and bound as a character, it doesn't mean that you qualify as a Disney adult. I know plenty of well-rounded people who enjoy the aesthetic of the ears, or who like to bound as characters every once in a while, which really is just good fun if that's something that you enjoy. But when it becomes your entire personality, and you have no actual volition outside of identifying with the iconography of Disney intellectual property, that's when I lose respect for you. A Disney adult will almost always dress in Disney merch, but if you're categorizing all people who dress that way as Disney adults, then I simply think that you're wrong and mean-spirited, and are probably ragging on people that don't deserve it simply as engagement bait.
Yeah, basically I completely agree with him because it's basically a spectrum, right? Where on one side is hardcore, absolute die-in-the-wool Disney adult, and the other side is just like theme park goer, theme park enjoyer, stuff like that, right? For me, I'm more on. I skew closer to Disney adult, but I'm not. I'm not like there. I'm more like, as you could tell from this video, more of like a theme park guy. But the reason why I'm more on that side is because of the fact that I grew up in the 90s during the Disney Renaissance. Um, and so I grew up with a lot of Disney VHSs and stuff like that. So I grew up like rewatching damn near religiously like movies like The Lion King on VHS and The Little Mermaid and stuff, and Disney's Aladdin. So I grew up with and Mulan. So I grew up with a lot of Disney memorabilia and merchandise in my life. So I grew up with the explosion of Disney in the 90s and watching the Disney Channel, etc., on TV. So yeah, I'm a Disney guy. I like their characters, especially the characters from the 90s, but the characters from the 90s and the early 2000s specifically. But I am not, so while I would wear Disney merch while I'm there in the park, because why the fuck not? Uh, I'm not like, my entire personality isn't Disney, as you can fucking tell. I mean, look at my channel. I mostly talk about Fate on this channel more so than I do Disney. So, yeah.
No, a Disney adult is something much more primal. They're the kind of person who will recoil if you suggest going to Universal. They're the
Oh yeah, so clearly I'm not a Disney adult in that aspect because if you throw a Universal Park ticket at me, I would say hell fucking yeah. I just want to go to a theme park. Like you throw it like, oh, we're going here, like fuck yeah, dude. I would enjoy the shit out of it. Like the reason I want to go to Disney World is just because I've never been, but at some point in my life, I would also like to go to Universal because fuck yeah, why the hell not? Universal is also a great theme park. You throw like a SeaWorld ticket at me, sure, fuck it, let's go. Let's make a vacation out of it. Let's do it. Again, I'm a guy who enjoys going to the local zoo. Right, I go to the zoo back, I've moved away from, when I say Pacific Northwest, I've moved out of Oregon. That's where I was born and raised. And when I was in Oregon, I went to Oaks Park all the fucking time. Went to Oaks Park, went to the Oregon Zoo, etc., OMSI, all of it. I just like experiencing stuff. I just like getting out of the house and going and doing things. So, hell yeah. I am definitely not the person who's like, oh, I'm above going to Universal. Fuck you. Universal's great.
kind of person who can't stop telling their coworkers about their next quarterly Disney trip and has to reference Disney in every aspect of their life. They are the kind of person who will blindly endorse every single change made to the Disney parks and will shout from the rooftops how magical it all is. They are the consumer with no standards, who has fixated specifically on Disney at a superficial level and completely lacks critical thought. A good example of this is Moana Journey of Water, which is an interactive water attraction placed awkwardly in the middle of Epcot. While it's true that Disney has tried to erase the futuristic theming of Future World, it has created a bizarre naming system for different areas that are actually corporate buzzwords rather than themed lands. They didn't do a great job of actually removing the futuristic and technological aspect of the area. When I see a Moana attraction in a place that it clearly doesn't fit, I can't help but hate it, because who actually thought that this was a good idea? It's a shame, because the water effects, when they're working at least, are actually fun, and this could have been dressed up in a way that's genuinely educational and could have fit Future World. There's potential in this concept for something great and appropriate for Epcot, and that's what is so frustrating, because there's a corporate mandate to shove Disney characters into everything, even when they have no business being there. Worse, there are so many grown adults who look at this, clasp their hands together, and will proclaim how cute it all is and how wonderful Disney has been to keep evolving the parks. As a theme park fan, I absolutely hate the inability of corporate Disney to come up with interesting ideas, and worse, Disney adults will back them every single time. They are not theme park fans who care about the integrity of the experience or the theming, but will only go to the parks to literally see familiar iconography. I think about a relatively recent experience I had within the last year or so, where I was walking through Epcot during the Flower and Garden Festival. I passed by a group of people, and one woman in that group noticed a topiary nearby that was shaped like Goofy. To the clear disinterest of everyone else, she exclaims, "Oh my god, it's Goofy! Look guys, it's Goofy! Look, Look, it's Goofy! I thought to myself, what do you get out of this? What's the point? What's the appeal? Maybe if I was a child, I might think it's neat that someone was able to design the shape of a character into a bush, but I see you here as a grown adult who has no other thought behind your eyes beyond pointing and trying to get other people to acknowledge that yes, this is in fact a Disney character topiary. It's that kind of superficial interaction with the park that makes you a Disney adult. Someone who doesn't actually enjoy the place you're in for what it is, but simply because, again, you only identify with Disney character iconography, and the thought stops there. It seems ridiculous, almost a joke even, to suggest that this kind of person exists. But when I go to theme parks, I like to people watch and see how they react to various aspects of the parks. For example, I like to buy a pass to Halloween Horror Nights every year, and I'm always curious how the intellectual property brings in very specific demographics of people. For example, 2023's Last of Us House and 2025's Fallout brought in a lot of video game fans, and while waiting in line, I would excitedly hear them talk about what they expected to see from the games. 2025's Five Nights at Freddy's brought in a lot of teenagers who were only really there to fake scream at an ear-piercing pitch and ruin the experience for everyone else. And 2023's Chucky Ultimate Kill Count had a noticeably higher quantity of drunk and aggressive park guests who got into fights in the line, because I guess there's a trashy and edgy demographic that was attracted to the property. There's certainly nothing wrong with enjoying any of these, but sometimes they really do have problematic fan bases, and you really do see them show up in the parks. As a theme park fan, I love the artistry and storytelling that goes into the houses, but there are many people who will show up, do 2 or 3 things, one of which is said intellectual property that attracted them there, and then leave and complain that they didn't do anything. It's not quite the same as a...
Yeah, no. Again, that's also like something that I would love to do. That's why if I go to Universal, I would love to do it sometime around Halloween, because again, as said, Halloween is one of my favorite holidays, and I would love to do the haunted houses. And yeah, no. Here's the thing. I am not one of those people. I am not one of those people who are going to be like, oh, I'm just going to go to the Fallout thing, do 2 or 3 other things, and then leave, and then complain that you didn't do anything. Oh, hell no. If I'm paying for the price of that expensive a ticket, especially with the fact of having to fly down to Orlando, rent a hotel stay and all that, if I'm doing all that, you best believe I'm getting my money's worth. I will stay in the parks until they kick me the fuck out. Like, I will stay and just chat with the actors that are dressed up. I don't give a shit. Oh, hell no. I ain't leaving for at least a couple hours. Like, once I get into the park, I ain't leaving until at least a couple hours. Fuck you. I'm not one of those people. Like, hell no. I'll spend a while just like watching the actors who are paid to just roam the parks and scare people. Like, just because I'm like, well, they're putting in a lot of hard work, I might as well appreciate it. So, like, yeah, I just don't get these people. You like, when you go to a theme park, you're like, the whole thing is to breathe in the vibe and the atmosphere. Like, yes, I get it. The main attractions are the rides, but you can literally, like, it's possible. I hope you know it's possible that when you go to a theme park, you could just find a nice place where you're not in people's way and just stand and appreciate the theme park.
Disney adult who will love anything that Disney does as long as a character is slapped onto it, but it's really not that different in that you didn't actually come for the theme park, but rather for a property that you happen to be familiar with. I've never been on TikTok as a platform, but I remember there was a couple who posted videos on there criticizing Tokyo Disney Sea as being overrated because it wasn't Disney enough for them. I mean, how astounding is that? Criticizing a park that is often regarded as the best in the world for the sheer audacity of its theming and detail, simply because you weren't constantly bombarded with cutesy, capital D Disney branding the entire time. From my observation, a Disney adult is a very specific type of person, one who lives an insulated suburban life.
Yeah, Yeah, no, if I go to a theme park, I'm going to again, especially being the fact that I'm paying a ticket, I'm going to appreciate what it is, not what I want it to be. And so if I go to Tokyo, like he said, Tokyo Disney Sea or whatever, um, and they don't have a bunch of Disney characters running around, that's fine. I'll appreciate it for what it is, not what I might want it to be, because it's a Disney park. Like, so yeah, no, I what the fuck? Oh, there's not a whole lot of Disney characters running around, so this park sucks. Like, well, fuck you. You could have gone to a different park. You didn't have to go to this one.
His ignorance to the outside world, other than through obsessive, bizarre Disney media consumption, and is always upbeat and positive to a degree that feels inauthentic. Honestly, I don't even really trust people unless they have a bit of practical cynicism instilled in them. However, you're always going to have people who say, why can't you just leave other people alone? You might not like them, but they're not doing any harm, just let them be. And I would answer to that, actually, they are doing me harm. Their blind endorsement of corporate Disney, both through their voice and their wallets, has a direct correlation on the destruction of theming and storytelling in the Disney parks. They signal to Disney leadership that they don't have to actually put effort into the creative direction, maintenance, and general park experience because there will always be a demographic of people who will line up and shove money at the company regardless of what they do. The very existence of the Disney adult is a toxic influence that Disney leadership takes as positive feedback, and as a theme park fan who once loved Disney as the quality and creative industry standard, and not just because they were Disney, I think it's clear that Disney adults are actually a huge part of the problem. I think it's important to address a point that will probably come up in the comments, and that's why I'm so highly critical of Disney for its push of intellectual property and not Universal. To me, the difference is very clear. Disney already has pre-established parks with strong cohesive themes, and the current leadership of Disney actively destroys all of that for attractions that don't fit, but feature a marketable intellectual property. A good example is Animal Kingdom, where when it was announced that Avatar would be coming to the park in 2017 and getting its own land, I was immediately skeptical. Fortunately, with the creative direction of Imagineering at the time, this idea was salvaged into a land that actually fit various themes of Animal Kingdom, but instead took a science fiction approach that could be interpreted as a modern manifestation of human relationships to mythical animals and how this shapes the way in which we use animals in storytelling. However, when I look at the direction that the park is taking now in 2025, I see how Disney is completely destroying Dinoland USA, which is truly one of the most brilliantly themed lands ever designed. If you're not a regular watcher on my channel, you might be confused by that statement, but the land had an incredible level of cultural depth that highlighted human relationships to dinosaurs through media. It explored our conception of them as terrifying creatures, but also as a form of cultural kitsch and Americana, covering a wide range of conceptions in an exceptionally detailed land that continue to reveal more and more if you chose to look for it. I understand why most people didn't pick up on this, mistaking the intentionally tacky theming as something cheap. But if you want a real and comprehensive in-depth look at what made Dinoland one of the greatest themed lands ever built, I do have an hour-long video that really dives into why its destruction is so sad. Worse though, is that it's being replaced with a Disney Plus land that has absolutely nothing to do with Animal Kingdom. Yes, it is true that the land does have a Disney animal IP carousel, but will also feature an Encanto and Indiana Jones attraction that I predict will at best only superficially reference animals and will have nothing to do with the deeper themes of the park. Disney is calling this land Tropical Americas, but let's recognize it for what it is. And you know who's absolutely going to love this land? That's right, Disney adults will sing the praises of how cute everything is. But regardless of the quality of the rides, whether they turn out great or not, ultimately they will never fit the park unless Disney puts forth an honest effort, which, from the concept, was clearly never the intent. Going back to the point about not criticizing Universal for the same thing, well, they don't do the same thing. At their studio parks, they do feature an eclectic collection of rides and shows from various properties, but that's exactly the point. Universal's early parks were founded on literally letting you ride the movies, but while the educational filmmaking aspect has taken a backseat since the 2010s, their parks still feel thematically cohesive, even if improvements could be made. However, if I look at Islands of Adventure and Epic Universe, they're not just shoving random properties in everywhere, and actually have a strong thematic vision for what they want to do. It's also worth noting that most Universal attractions are interesting in spite of the intellectual property, regardless of the actual quality of the films or familiarity with the material. Universal has now built 3 Jurassic World attractions, and they're all top tier, despite the film series itself being just not great. Their immense quality sells me on the idea of Jurassic World a lot better than the actual films do. While Universal undeniably has bad attractions here and there, specifically with VillainCon and DreamWorks Land, their creative process post-2018 is a lot stronger and more consistent than Disney, who often feel like they're throwing darts at a board to choose an intellectual property in a park, and then demand that Imagineering tries to make it fit. Universal understands how intellectual properties drive park attendance along with merchandise and themed food sales, but the design comes first and feels like genuine passion was put into it. Nobody was asking for a land themed to the How to Train Your Dragon franchise, but wow, this is far more interesting than most of what Disney has done throughout the entirety of the Iger era. As a theme park fan, while I really am getting sick of everything needing to be based on a movie or media franchise, where there are so many great original ideas that could be highly successful, at least with Universal, I'm getting great theming and well-designed rides in a way that I'm just not from Disney. A good example of this is if you compare their more recent shows. At Epic Universe, I've seen a lot of mixed reviews of Le Cercle Arcanu, which is based on the Fantastic Beasts spin-off of the Harry Potter franchise. Those films are both critical and commercial failures, but the actual theme park show is far more interesting. However, it's gotten a fair amount of criticism, specifically pointing out the show's logistical issues of packing everyone into the pre-show, and how for the actual performance itself, the pacing is a bit off, and the ending can feel abrupt. I agree with those criticisms and acknowledge that it's a flawed product, but ultimately, there's still a high level of competency in its design that I'm just not seeing from Disney. If we take a look at the new Country Bear Jamboree, it's genuinely awful. Not only are the music choices almost exclusively songs from Disney musicals, which considering that this is meant to be a country musical show, feels so egotistical through how shallow and unnecessary it is, but the actual writing of the show is also just done poorly. For example, the animal busts on the wall make continuous jokes about how they're detached from their bodies, and it was amusing once or twice, but when the joke just keeps going on and on and on, it just makes you groan because you wonder, who thought that this was a good idea? While there are clever elements of the show that I enjoy here and there, like for example the smoke effect coming from the fiddle, it's otherwise just standard corporate Disney nonsense, using intellectual property, in this case songs from their movies, as a crutch for a lack of substance. Another example of this is a recent addition to Hollywood Studios called Disney Villains Unfairly Ever After. This 15-minute show has very little actually going on and is almost purely filler, with the premise being Disney villains are coming into the real world and are crying about how they're all misunderstood. The conclusion of the show essentially boils down to a popularity contest about which villain is the most misunderstood, perfectly illustrating my point that new Disney attractions are literally as shallow as shoving characters in front of you and adding nothing of substance. In the same vein, I guess we can also talk about the new show at Animal Kingdom, Zootopia Better Zoogether. It is, again, filler that relies purely on your recognition of Zootopia as a franchise to draw you in, but throughout the entirety of the show, nothing actually really happens. It's really just a series of loosely related scenes that are shoved together to try to reuse all the sensory effects in place that already existed in the theater. While its predecessor, Tough to Be a Bug, was a really dated show, At least it made sense in the Tree of Life, because obviously insects live in trees, but it was also educational, showcasing biological features of bugs and arachnids, and promoting a message of how these creatures are beneficial to environments and ecosystems. Sure, maybe the information was surface level, but it was presented in a way that was easy for kids to understand, and it's certainly a lot better than the new Zootopia show, which has nothing to do with the Tree of Life or Animal Kingdom. It is essentially best described as pure noise for the sake of noise. Returning back to my original example of Les Cirques Arcanu, the actual land of Wizarding Paris is far more interesting than the actual Fantastic Beasts films, and the show itself does a great job of showcasing these incredible creatures, mostly through puppetry. While I think that it too could be criticized for having moments of filler, the overall production is still much stronger and actually has a story that you can follow. The difference between intellectual property, if you're comparing Universal versus Disney, is that Universal takes weak franchises and turns them into fantastic, immersive attractions that are great regardless of the material. But with Disney, they can take a competent movie like Zootopia and turn it into absolute garbage for their parks. A lot of what Disney does nowadays is purely just a showcase of character iconography over actual theming and experience. And so I have to ask, why are they still successful and making money? If you're a theme park enthusiast, it's easy to recognize that Disney just isn't even trying any longer, and it's upsetting to see a company that was once known for its high quality to just throw everything away. For example, I'm still incredibly angry that the Rivers of America are being taken out of Magic Kingdom, because not only is the Cars replacement a bizarre idea born purely out of merchandising potential in the park, but because there was so much missed potential for the river that was never realized. I always point to Disneyland as an example of this, as when Galaxy's Edge was being constructed there, the real benefit to the park was the updated river, which had new scenery and effects that really enhanced it. And you know what? The various attractions that circle the river are quite popular and benefit from these changes. Meanwhile, Magic Kingdom's river was neglected for 50 years, and when I bring up how awful its removal is, and how I wish that Disney had actually invested in it, there's always some simpleton who would chime in and say that nobody ever went on the riverboat or Tom Sawyer Island, and that Cars is a good change for the park. I think it really says a lot, and that there are certain people out there who will never experience the other attractions outside of those that feature recognizable characters. And that again brings me back to the divide between theme park fans and Disney adults. An excuse that I always hear from them is that Disney makes the changes that they do because it's all for kids, like with the new Country Bear Jamboree. While I think it is certainly true that many kids will enjoy things that they recognize from their favorite films, for instance, my niece who likes Frozen was enthralled with Frozen Ever After, the general sentiment that kids are incapable of engaging with the parks beyond this is really actually an insult to them. My niece may have loved Frozen Ever After, but was also equally engaged with other attractions like Expedition Everest and the Haunted Mansion, and generally was actually much more excited by Universal over Disney, despite not being familiar with most of their IP. Speaking for myself as a child, my favorite park as a kid was Epcot, specifically because I appreciated that it was a lot of unique and original ideas. I grew up craving the atmosphere of the first quarter of Living with the Land, being absorbed with the surreal scenes in Spaceship Earth, and being fascinated by the close-up encounters with dinosaurs in Ellen's Energy Adventure. I liked how strange and disconcerting the scenes were in Maelstrom, and while I felt that El Rio del Tiempo was never great from an educational point of view, I still really enjoyed the atmosphere created by the sets. As a child, I liked Disney IP too, especially with attractions like Peter Pan's Flight and Snow White's Scary Adventures, but I also liked how they were contained mostly just to Magic Kingdom, and how the other parks had distinct identities and offered very different experiences from one another. To say that Disney only builds things for kids is partially true, because they know that a lot of kids will beg their parents to buy the merch. But what Disney also knows is that a lot of adults never really developed beyond early childhood either, and are some of their biggest financial supporters. I think of the people who tell me that I don't understand Galaxy's Edge because you have to be a Star Wars fan to get it, which is actually really funny because I enjoy the George Lucas films and a lot of the expanded universe. The reason I don't like Galaxy's Edge is because it's not a great example of themed design, throwing in a lot of literal junk to fill up space, rather than taking the time to construct an interesting and explorable world in the same way that something like Dinoland was. For a different example, I remember a specific instance where I was at someone's house, and the 2023 version of the Haunted Mansion movie was playing in the background. I made a joke to somebody about how bad the film was, and someone who I definitely would classify as a Disney adult had to aggressively interject and say that he liked the film, as if I had personally attacked him. First, the Haunted Mansion film could not be a better example of a corporate mandated brand synergy idea, because if you've seen this film, it could not be clearer that everyone involved was just showing up for a paycheck, and there was absolutely no love put into this. Second, if you so blindly identify with this film that you're willing to defend it as a Haunted Mansion fan, then I don't even think that you're actually a fan. You engaged with this purely at a branding level, and as a Haunted Mansion fan myself, I thought this movie was terrible because of how it fails to live up to the appeal of the classic attraction. Disney as a company is throwing away its cultural relevance, both through lazy, risk-averse filmmaking and through the actual parks themselves, opting for the Six Flags playbook and throwing in random characters everywhere to support a lack of competent attraction design. Yeah, there are a few highlights of greatness here and there, like the new test track, the Adventureland Treehouse, or the Beak and Barrel, but it appears that when Disney corporate has its hand in most projects, that's when everything fails. For theme park fans, and for a larger general public that likes theming but isn't necessarily invested in it, Disney is becoming less and less interesting, and I think that will be massively detrimental over a long period of time. Disney adults are undoubtedly their target audience, people who will support them vocally and financially regardless of what they do, because they don't actually have any interest in the parks beyond corporate Disney branding. The drop in Disney quality over the Iger era has been undeniable, and when myself or others point out these issues and try to provide a voice because we want Disney to change direction, who is it that automatically has to come to Disney's defense and will tell you that you're wrong for wanting anything other than consuming capital D Disney branding? Disney adults are absolutely a toxic problem and are something that I felt needed addressing. If you made it here to the end of the video, know that there wasn't a lot of structure throughout the script, but it's more just a collection of individual thoughts I've had over the past year that I felt like I needed to express. At the end of this though, I think it's important to remember that people who engage with IP superficially are just an inherent part of the population. It's always bizarre when I read about people who went to Universal just to experience the Wizarding World, and literally nothing else. It's the kind of people who show up to Halloween Horror Nights simply because they recognize a property, and of course, the Disney adults who have made the aesthetics of Disney their entire personality. You can't get rid of them, but you can certainly influence the conversation and point out why their feedback is detrimental to the experience of others. Hopefully though, through this video, I was able to explain the distinction between theme park fans and Disney adults. And if you think it's important to highlight the problems that I pointed out, one easy way to do that is to just leave a like on the video, which helps boost the message to a larger audience. As always though, if you enjoy videos like these and have not yet subscribed and hit the bell notification yet either, you can also do so now to be alerted to new videos as they're released.
So, yeah, I completely agree with him that Disney is going downhill, and he has definitely got me to think a few things. Because, again, I haven't officially bought my ticket yet. So, again, and the vacation that I'm planning isn't until next year, I may or may not decide ultimately to go to Universal instead. Because he's got me in this video to think about a few things. So, yeah, But with that, I am Otaku Shinsaku, and I will definitely be seeing you guys next time whenever I have another upload. So, speaking of subscribing to him, I definitely would if you want more of his content. And if you want more of my content, please subscribe to myself because you're going to need to get notifications because I don't have a set schedule for when I upload, as you guys have noticed. I upload whenever I have a video ready. When a video is ready, I upload it. Simple as that. Bye!